to record. So, welcome, Jenny. Thank you so much for coming. I met you last week. It was only last week, and you came for a massage. And firstly, I loved the way you talked. I loved the way you communicate. You actively sort of use and engage your body, and you're very lyrical. And this is the way I described you to other people. It's kind of, it was a beautiful. I just loved the way that you spoke. But not only that, just the life experience that you've had growing up in the 60s and all of that change and all of that exciting newness and that sense of love, I suppose, which was profound at the time. I don't know. You tell me, how was that? How was that experience? What happened for you? Where were you? All of the above. Just
Okay, well, I'll press you some of it. So I was a mixed race. I came from a far left, progressive, liberal, interracial, atheist background.
okay.
My dad was a card carrier, a black man, artist, card carrying commie who ran on the communist ticket for local office back in the 50s in New Jersey. And so I grew up in kind of a understanding that I wasn't like the rest. Interracial marriages in America were still illegal in some states until the 60s in America. Mm. That particular issue wasn't something that bothered me or came up. My folks were married, we lived in New Jersey, and that was just a fact of life. But I did grow up recognizing an awful lot of injustice all around me and a great deal of prejudice all around me. And because I was raised in an environment that said, think for yourself, ask questions, and don't assume anything unless you know better. I really had the best upbringing in that regard. But anyway, I was living in Vauxhall, New Jersey, a suburb. I just, as a teenager, and by the time I was 13, I thought, oh God, when do I get out of here? I just felt strangled and blocked in every conceivable way, trying to grow in that environment. And I was already a writer, a songwriter as a kid.
At 13?
Oh yeah, and because my father was an artist, so I grew up in a creative environment. I was encouraged to use my talent or my skills, or to sort of explore my curiosity about whatever. But I felt quite suffocated in Vauxhall, New Jersey, and so did a lot of other boomer teenagers.
Yeah.
We were an enormous group. We were the first teenagers, really. I mean, I think up until the boomers, you were a kid, and then you took responsibility for your life one way or the other. We had this sort of halcyon period in America, particularly. We had everything. The future was absolutely open to us. Nothing was impossible. It was, whatever you could dream of, you could aspire to, go for it.
And it was that post-war as well, generation that you were, yes, certainly there was growth from that, wasn't there?
Absolutely. Well, in this country, you were still on rations when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, this country had a different, but that was a different story leading to another one. So anyway, off I went as soon as I could. My father took me to the Blue Note, a jazz club in Greenwich Village in the 60s. I was 13. I don't know why they let him take me in, because people were smoking and drinking, and it's that jazz club. But boy, oh boy, I looked around and I was so excited. I saw these really fabulously interesting people having fabulously animated conversations and looking really good, and just, it was wonderful. And then we went home to New Jersey, and I went, well, what is this? just wasn't making me happy. Anyway, so like a lot of my peers, we flooded into Greenwich Village, New York of the 60s, and we hung around Washington Square playing guitars and bongo drums and flute and anything else that was portable and could make music, and made a lot of friendships. with other kids my age who were similarly escaping boredom and ennui of the suburbs and anywhere else that they weren't being fed culturally, creatively. So it was a very exciting time. And the seeds, in fact, of that time are now, I'm an astrologer, so the seeds of that time are now actually beginning to manifest. They're beginning to bloom. This is like 50, 60 years later. I mean, this, you know, things, eras of change take time.
Yeah.
Turning around oil tanker, I heard somebody describe the other day, you know, changes in culture and thought, really, which is where it begins. And but certainly the heart, that's the most important thing. And it feels like we're in a phase now that reminds me of that period in my youth. The difference is that things look rather bleak as opposed to optimistic. Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring, which was published in the 60s, where she admonished the powers that be for not paying attention to the way they were using Earth's resources and talking about climate change.
Wow.
There will be parents of you and your friends who will remember Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. And of course, all this has come to fruition. So this is what, for me, it's like, yes, a kid in exciting time in the 60s in New York. And of course, for the fun bit, the British invasion took place. Suddenly, there was this flood of gorgeous, skinny, beautiful young English people with long hair and velvet and ruffles and shit. Wow, they were gorgeous. American guys my age were wearing lumberjack shirts and stuff, and they found me quite intimidating. I had too much to say for myself. I don't think that's changed. I think there'd be universal agreement on that one. But also, who are you, Jenny? What are you? I confused people. And I realized when I look back now, and this is not ego speaking, just reality, I was the voice of the future. I didn't know that. I just talked about what I was talking about and felt what I was feeling for justice, for inequality, for the lack of opportunity for so many people, you know, not just in the suburbs of New Jersey, but around the world. I was really quite keenly aware of the rest of the world. My family made sure of that, but then this British invasion took place. Okay, so the musicians and I, who had such a good time playing music around Washington Square, and also in the basket house, we just perform and pass the basket around after the performance, and you couldn't live off it.
Okay.
that was a fact. You had
So how were you living? How were you making your money? How were you?
Waitressing.
Okay.
I was a waitress for a while at a place called the Figaro, which is, I think it's still there. I mean, obviously different management and ownership or whatever, but it was a pretty classic spot. There were an awful lot of places to work as a waitress or a waiter or a bartender, that kind of thing. Most of us were too young to be bartenders. We used to lie a lot. I got a lot of jobs. I worked at a place called the Cafe A Go-Go, which was the first place I saw Lenny Bruce perform live. And I don't, I come up with names sometimes like that. And I think, gee, I just said his name, but do they have any idea who that is?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So there I was. I had lied to get this job waitressing at the Cafe A Go-Go, and Lenny Bruce turns up on stage doing his spiel. He wasn't a comedian. He was a satirist. And one of the things that he could do, and I've never seen anybody do it as well since, command the stage himself in a stool, and he could be a couple of different people. He could have a conversation with himself, blah, 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 blah. And then he'd have a rebuttal or a retort or whatever. And it was hilarious because he told the truth about the world as it was, which I found absolutely fabulous. I mean, it was like, oh, wow, this guy, he thinks just like I do. I got sacked from that job when they found out I was only 16. But I had a really good time. I also saw Paul Newman there with his wife, Joanne. And it was so, because a lot of, this was Greenwich Village, New York in the 60s. people used to come there specifically because it was a cool place. So that brought all kinds of people into the clubs and the places where I was working. Anyway, I was very disappointed because he was tiny.
Oh, really?
Gorgeous blue eyes. I mean,
Yes.
and
Oh, yeah, I thought he was gorgeous.
he was, but he didn't know it. But he was also about this tall. Anyway, that was very disappointing.
It's a bit like Brad Pitt. When I met Brad Pitt, it was the same.
It's frustrating, isn't it? But you see, that it just proves, you know, that it isn't about how big you are.
Yeah.
It really isn't. So, yeah. And so through my friendships that developed in the village during that period with all these people from everywhere, and there were actually, in addition to the musicians, there were people like Joan Rivers and Bill Cosby. They were new then. Cosby went on to fuck himself up, but you know, men have a tendency to do really insane stuff.
Yeah.
That can really screw them up. But all of it, Lenny Bruce, Bob Newworth, just this amazing array of music, poetry, journalists, musicians of every stripe, dancers, photographers, painters. The talent was just unbelievable, and it was just concentrated in downtown Manhattan. Yeah, there was stuff happening uptown and so forth. I'm not taking anything away from that, but I'm just talking about my growth as a kid, you know, coming of age in that environment. And yeah, it was exciting. Of course, we didn't know. All we knew was we were having a really good time.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was a kind of environment then. When I was working as a waitress, I could walk home to the West Side, the Lower West Side, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. Never worried about being assaulted or any problem. What I didn't know initially was that because of the great Italian community in Lower Manhattan, there were certain rules.
Right.
You did not fuck with women. You didn't mess with kids. I mean, it was, you know, this is a strict social, cultural environment. Those of us pouring into Greenwich Village didn't recognize that, unless you were part of that Italian heritage, we didn't recognize that protection that we had as young women, but we did. Never worried about ever walking home in the dark at 3 o'clock in the morning in New York. Times have changed.
Yeah.
It's not like that. But again, I guess it's a question of the size of the population and the culture that's happening at the time. Yeah. So when the British invasion took place, it's kind of skipping a few, because I was a musician, I was a writer and a songwriter and a piano player, singer. And I did work at some of the local clubs briefly during that period of my life. I was approached any number of times by people who wanted to sign me up as talent or as a writer or whatever. And so I pursued some of those. However, I discovered very quickly that young women were expected to give up quite a lot of their personal dignity, if nothing else. And I wouldn't play. I just, no. And as I mentioned to you, I think last week, that when the suits got involved, you know, they realized how much money there was to be made. Because this was when people, like, when I first saw Bob Dylan, but he came to New York playing at the Purple Onion. Somebody said, "You got to come hear this guy." I said, "Oh, okay." Went round after my shift, wherever that was, and there was this guy. He was cute. And I said, "Well, his voice is crap, but his songs, the songs are fabulous."
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Because it was that there was so much talent, you know, so that if you were singing, you were going to be compared to a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, Amanda. When you asked me to talk about those days, you realize I am 76 years old.
I know, I apologize. But you have been talking wonderfully, so we don't notice that at all.
Okay, well, if you don't mind ping pong, I can do anything.
I don't mind ping pong at all.
Right. So I personally went from the folk environment, which was what drew so many of us in the 60s, to these areas, to San Francisco, to New York, to Boston, and so on. In fact, Washington too. There were a lot of people who came out of the Washington D.C. environment. People like Cass Elliot, who was later one of the Mamas and the Papas.
Oh yeah,
A bunch of people. Oh, what's his name? Chevy Chase, the comedian. There was just this group, this young group of people. Maybe, I don't know, initially maybe a few hundred of us. So everyone eventually kind of knew each other. If you didn't know each other, you knew somebody who knew that guy or that gal. So it was a very local kind of community for a while. Then that began to break up. It became much more global. The British invasion occurred. Here came these gorgeous guys. Oh my God, they were so beautiful. Everyone was so skinny. It was incredible. When I look back and I think, wow, we were so skinny. People must have looked at us and thought, oh, feed them. Somebody once left a pair of a pair of his velvet trousers. And I'm thinking about them now, they were about that wide. Nobody was very big. But they were also much more worldly, some of these guys, because they'd been although the bands we were very young, but bands that had formed here in Britain often had a chance to play around Europe. So, Germany was a big spot for them, but they had more experience in the rest of the world, and they brought that with them to America, which was kind of a hothouse at the time and boring on account of it, just in terms of what the guys were like. They were great, but they weren't exciting. And here came these exciting talents. So yes, I had my pick. I was usually pretty good at identifying. Well, it was easy. I mean, there are these beautiful people who arrived, and then talent, which was the thing that was what turned me on. Talent.
Yeah.
Well, these fabulous players and singers. And then I got a phone call from a friend, a British friend, who said, oh, my buddy Robert's coming over. It's his first gig in the States. Look after him. That was Robert Plant. Right. So the first time I met him, we used to hang out at a club called The Scene, owned by a guy named Steve Paul. And it's legend, this place. And I used to sit there at the bar with my ephemeris, this very book, which astrologers will recognize. It gives you the positions of the planets at any particular date, time, blah, blah, blah. And this particular one goes from 1931 to 1950. So it really has this just bunch of musicians who I was able to get their
Oh my goodness.
dates and time of birth. Eric Burden, Jimmy. I spent a lot of time with Jimmy, actually. He was a good friend. And yeah, so I liked them and they liked me. It was wonderful. It was a smorgasbord of gorgeousness.
Sorry,
And
when you said Jimmy who?
Hendrix.
And Jimi
There's
Hendrix.
another one.
Hmm.
Not another. Well, Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page might take exceptions to that. He was a friend too. So I don't want to, I could make it all about Jenni the groupie. And there's enough documented evidence, I suppose, that I can never come away from that one. But it was kind of a choice. And I fell into it quite by accident. Although I had decided I was not going to suck anybody's anything to be a professional performer, because there was a lot of pressure about that. I wasn't going to stop having fun.
Mm.
I was going to choose. If I was going to do that, I was going to choose. And I did very well. and had a really great time sort of introducing Brits to American culture, such as it was in Greenwich Village, which didn't really represent the rest of the country, but there you go, right? And it was a very heady time. Everyone was, again, young, beautiful, skinny. Everything was possible.
Yeah.
So much talent, quite extraordinary. Jimmy died. I had my first child as a single mom and was back in New York. I had lived in this country for a while. This is where my first child was born in 1971. He's now a world-class jazz musician in his 50s. I don't know how the hell that happened, but it did. Anyway, yeah. So having gone back to New York from England, obviously skipped out a whole chunk of stuff, but I went back with a child. And I was introduced to Buddhism. Because with a kid, I found I could no longer enjoy my gay abandon, you know, doing whatever, whenever, wherever. Now you got responsibilities. It's time for some adulting. My daughter calls it that. Never been fond of it myself, but it's true. Yeah, so I could not carry on my previous lifestyle, was the short version. Although my first husband was a musician, but that was a different relationship. Now I'm a family person.
So was your first husband the father of your son then?
No. My son Liberty was my son. He was born of Light and Jenni. And he's brilliant. He's a brilliant human being. Absolutely fabulous human being. Liberty is his name. So I do everything in reverse. First have the kid, then meet a guy, and then get married. Then I had another kid. So my life in the music business, such as it was, evaporated because he was in the music business and on the road, blah, blah. And yeah, life changed. And I do say now that for women who have creativity in them, and they are all of you, if you want to pursue a creative life, I suggest, and I'm not telling you don't do it, but having kids and getting married is going to slow you down. You're going to have untold reserves of determination if you wish to pursue creativity after you've got a family in a traditional family environment. Meanwhile, all that's changing. It's quite exciting. It's actually quite exciting. Pregnant men, holy shit, did not see that coming 50 years ago, okay? But this is exactly the point that I would choose to make in any case, that when I trace my history through from discontent with society as I saw it as a kid, unfair, unequal, discrimination, it was obvious to me that there were some people who were able to just get away with life, and there were a whole lot of folks that didn't. So that's always underpinned everything that I do. It underpinned what my songs were about. It underpins my political views. It underpins my complete involvement in humanity, because that's what we have failed to honor in recent decades. Really failed to honor humanity and life in general. You know, Mother Earth, she's not happy with us. And I don't blame her. So when I became a Buddhist, which was exactly 50 years ago this month, it was a friend, someone that I had met when I was working as a waitress in Greenwich Village, because it was in the early 70s then. And I'd come back from England with this child, and she said to me, "You need to know about this." And I said, "No, I don't." So that took a while. But she also had some serious issues. She had a serious addiction to drugs, and it was wrecking her. And she was brilliant. She's one of the, I don't know if you've got friends like this, you probably do, polymath. Whatever they do, they're brilliant at it.
Yeah.
whether it's knitting or boat building, or whatever, right? Everything they touch, they do. It's like, how do you do that? It's so good. And that was Ruth. So she had this addiction. She'd fallen in love, unhappy relationship. He was with somebody else, wasn't going to leave, blah, blah. Addiction got worse. I was very concerned for her, and I hadn't seen her for a while because I was busy being a new mom. And then she turned up one day, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and clean. A couple of months later, well, if you've ever known anyone with heavy drug addictions, a couple of months, it takes longer than that if you've had a long spell of mistreating yourself. Anyway, she turns up, in fact, looking great. How did that happen? Ruth, what are you doing? She said, that's why I came. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. She wanted to tell me she'd been chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Sure. I wasn't actually, but remember, I come from an intellectual background, atheist background. You know, it was like, oh, please. She said, well, suck it and see. That time I agreed to suck. So I did. And I chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And she said, if you do this, you will get proof that it works. So I did it. And I got proof after proof after proof that it works. That's why I'm still doing it 50 years later.
Wow.
Does it give you a life without problems? No. Can it help you to turn those problems into benefit, poison into medicine? Absolutely. So I'm still doing it. And it's the thing that I prefer to talk about the most of all. But I'll come back to some of the rock and roll stuff just because it's kind of fun. Based on my view from a Buddhist perspective.
Okay.
I've got all these old acquaintances who went on to fame and fortune. Oh my God, the fortunes. Wow. But money doesn't equate happiness.
Mm.
In fact, it can really put you in some serious stress.
Mm.
And who do you trust? And what do they want? And all of that stuff that comes with it. So when I think about my life as it is today, I'm not a global star of anything, except I can talk as long as I got space to do that. Because I have things I want to tell people about, because I'm concerned about the state of the planet. And I have 6 grandchildren. They live in New Jersey. They live in California. They live in Munich. They live in Sydney. And I'm looking around at the problems that each of these countries are experiencing and realizing, not for the first time over these 50 years, it's all connected. We have a responsibility to each other on this planet. We have a responsibility to the planet. So when I compare the riches and fame that were acquired by some of my good friends from back in the day of rock, in the early days of rock and roll, and I look at the way their lives have been impacted, you know, becoming a global success actually can be quite a daunting reality.
I imagine, yeah.
Where do you find your grounding, you know? So it can be quite tricky. And I think that now that it's possible for anyone to do a blog, whatever, you know, routine social media transmissions, and you can build a career like that. There's no question about that. Great. But it kind of feels like that happens in a silo, just as many of the political ideas that are existing at the moment happen in a silo. You only talk to people who believe what you believe, or only read about stuff that you already think, and that just reinforces it. Gender bending. This is not meant to be rude when I call them the alphabet people. LBGT, go carry on. But it's real. How do we reconcile these differences? Pregnant men, you know, This is a challenging time. And when I look at how my grandchildren are growing up, being challenged on every side, economic, social, the educational, our educational systems in the West are pathetic, absolutely pathetic. And for some reason, people are afraid of the truth. Wow. That's, I find quite terrifying. So I chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to make a positive contribution to society. And the goal of Nietzsche and Buddhism is world peace through individual happiness. And the individual happiness isn't about, well, I've got mine, fuck the rest of you, because that doesn't work. No. We're all connected to each other. We have to have concern for every bit of life, all life. And of course, that's the moment where we find ourselves exactly, is this conflict between the material plane and the three poisons, greed, anger, and stupidity, which are running the show at the moment. My job as a bodhisattva, and yours as a healer, all healers, all light workers, is to help change the karma of humanity. And we have to do this one person at a time. It doesn't work when you just, you publish some screed and hand it out to people. It doesn't work like that. It has to be life to life. You have to show people with your own life what's important to you. And the heart is the most important. It isn't about you have to love everyone. I will never love the orange menace of America. Number 45, as he's referred to by an astrologer that I know who calls him the pestilent peril. He just has all these horrible nicknames. For the guy who shall remain nameless. Wow, that guy's got Buddhahood in him too, but I'll never like it. No. Because the chances of him drawing that out are practically non-existent. His greed has buried everything, absolutely everything, and his ego, buried everything. And people will now, in this country too, get up in positions of authority and lie. Oh, lie again, more lying. This is what it is, more lies. Ooh, how are kids, when they're trying to develop the skills for adulting, how do they develop the right skills in the 21st century when they're surrounded with obvious dickheads? It's no wonder they're struggling. It wasn't 2 years of lockdown so much as this lack of concern for life. Yeah. Because greed is too big. Why would they talk about a windfall tax on the energy producers and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it while people are afraid to turn on the heat because it's too expensive? And yet Shell had made 8 billion pounds, or maybe it was dollars. Okay. Does it matter when you're in billions? Where do you draw that line? What happens to that money? So this is where we are now. So all of my rock and roll, yay, I'm really glad I had that in my life. And bear with me, I have to go close the door. Yeah. Yes, I was saying, really glad that I had the opportunity when I was young and to enjoy what there was to enjoy of life, because I feel that those days, you can't get anywhere near them now. What I experienced in the 60s, when all was optimism and hope for the future. Yeah. All wide open, wide open. What's your dream? Go for it. Am I upsetting a dog?
Yeah, she wants to go outside, but I think I've got a very nice man coming to save the day. So
Oh, okay, great. Great. It's a miserable day. It's not a great day to be out.
no.
Anyway, yeah. So I feel very grateful to have had those years of tremendous fun. Recently, I read that for everyone, there is a 3-year window in life when you can create your reputation. It's when you're who you are and what you are known to be
Okay.
becomes, yeah. And there's a 3-year period during which that happens. And it's quite interesting to me when I went back to look at Jimi's Hendrix, because he didn't live that long.
Yeah.
And to see that, yes, there was because he worked in the business, playing the Chitlin Circus and all that before the rock and roll years. And how so many people, including me, were able to create this persona,
Yeah.
or had it created for us. I mean, that was, more like. But what do we do now? Youth is wonderful. I wouldn't like being a kid now, and I'm really glad that I raised my children before social media
Yes, absolutely.
around, because it's just
Brilliant.
rotting. It's
Yeah.
rotting
Yeah.
society. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
problem. What can we do? That's really the most important question. So the most important facts for me are, number one, to, regardless of how difficult life may be, to never give up, and carry your memories forward with pride. I remember somebody saying, "Oh, you're in these books as a groupie and stuff." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm in books. What do
Exactly.
you got?"
And you're on the internet. There's a wonderful picture of you
Oh,
looking amazing.
yeah, that was a picture taken by Baron Wolman,
Okay.
who was the first full-time photographer for Rolling Stone magazine back in the day, in the beginning. And Baron, who died, it was last year, I think, was the most wonderful documenter, not just a brilliant photographer, but he was at the gigs. He was there.
Yeah.
And that was the whole point of that phase of my life.
Yeah.
You had to be there.
Yeah.
So people now say, well, if there's no picture, it never happened. It's a very strict, reality has changed.
Yeah. Definitely.
Once upon a time, it was real. It was physical reality.
Yeah, well,
Now,
now we can spend our life completely by the end of behind the camera, can't we? Behind a phone, looking life through the lens.
yeah, and well filtered.
Yeah,
You can filter, you can look like anyone, really. It's kind of scary, but I believe that we have a purpose in life, and that the purpose of human existence is to become happy. I know that sounds a little airy-fairy, like it bounces along, on top of all the, oh, Jesus, have you seen that pile of shit? But actually, that is the purpose of life, is to fulfill and to be happy. So even in the midst of these dire circumstances.
well, I think the Dalai Lama definitely proves that, because I actually had the very privilege of being able to be in the same vicinity of him at his birthday celebration, and the energy coming off him was profoundly wonderful. It was just magical. It was so uplifting. You couldn't not feel happy. And he has that. He's got that bouncy, happy joy about him, hasn't he?
He has.
And he meditates for like 7 hours a day, I think. Something
Right,
like
now
that.
then, okay. Dalai Lama, for whom I have tremendous respect. So let me preface this comment with that. One, who has 7 hours a day?
Nobody. Well, he wakes up
He
at 2 in the morning.
Well, if you get up at 3, you can do anything. He can do that. But most people, 7 hours a day, not going to happen. One. Two, he radiates that life force. That's what you get, right? That
Yeah.
life force that he radiates. Well, guess what? I have that. You have that. And Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which I've spent 50 years proving to myself, no one else has to believe it. I say, suck it and see. You can create that life force. You can raise that state of life and create that life force from you within by chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. I chant about an hour a day.
Okay.
If I'm trying to break through something, I might chant more than that. In other words, I'd be quite focused about something I need to deal with.
Is it something that you can do while you're doing the washing up, or do you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have something called Ego Hanzon, which is our object of worship. It's not something separate from us. It's a scroll that says Nam-myoho Renge Kyo down the center. And it actually represents me or you. Whoever owns this Gohanzon, that's you. It's not about the Gohanzon itself has any intrinsic power. I have the intrinsic power. The Gohanzon is just a mandala. You know, it's away from, I used to chant to the toaster before I got it. And I find chanting the Gohanzon is much more appropriate, which leads me, and I know this is kind of a weird thing to chuck into the middle of an interview, is Victoria Page actually Vicky Page? Because Vicky Page and I know each other in a long time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I just wanted to, yeah. Because I saw Victoria Page and I thought, oh, okay, hang on. That's Vicky. I know Vicky. I've known her for years.
Oh.
And she chants Nam-myoho Renge Kyo.
Yeah.
So yes, I am a bit of a salesman for Nam-myoho Renge Kyo because it works for anyone. That's the whole point. It's not about do it and be like me. It's about do it and be the best you, period. We don't have a higher deity. All of the energy, so all energy, that's all we are. That's we're stardust. And when you break it down, it's just pure energy. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is the name of that energy. I don't know why. I just know that it works. And in the early years of my practice, I spent time trying to disprove it. Coming from a far left progressive insulation background, right? No, I'm going to prove this doesn't work. Guess what? 50 years ago today, I'm still here. So there are people like yourself, like Vicky Page, healers, light workers, bodhisattvas, people who are doing what we can to help other people have better lives. And the planet. That's the extrapolation. Yeah, starts with me. And then it's I influence my environment, and so on and so on and so on. It's the stone that you throw in the pond. And then those ripples, yeah. That's how world peace happens. It doesn't happen because someone says you must put down your guns. Because I wish someone could do that in America. I have been living in this country since 1988, this time. And in that time, I've seen the United States of America jump into the toilet with his hair on fire. Wow. It's not okay. But I feel like they tend to show what it looks like. If you just if the libertarian attitude, well, yes, let them have whatever they want. Sure, open carry guns on the streets of New York. That'll be good. Great thinking. Really social. Excellent.
Oops, sorry.
See? Yeah, but she knows.
She knows. I'm just going to let her outside and then she'll hopefully stop barking at me. There we go. Sorry. Carry on.
Sorry. Yeah. So I know that music has the ability to bring people together.
Yeah.
It also has the ability to drive people apart. Oh, I don't like that stuff. It's if we look, I feel, if we continually view the world from this polarized perspective, or this, I'm this, so you're that. I win, so you lose. That constant That's not the place of happiness. That's not the place of humanity. The place of humanity is we're all in this together. And for these guys trying to deny climate change, or for Rishi Sunak, sorry, politics do manifest, to stand up and talk about it's going to be tough. And I'm thinking, well, where the fuck has this guy been for the last 10 years while other people have already been struggling like crazy? It's going to get tough. Why is it going to get tough? And how come you're so rich? What is that? This is the kind of time when we're really looking at these inequalities and saying, wait a minute, this is not working.
No.
And nobody ever said it was going to be fair, but how about a shot at it? You know, and it is a time of change. We will be seeing from next spring, when Pluto dips its toe into Aquarius, for anyone who cares about such things, whether you care or not, it's going to happen. That's, people say, oh, you believe in that stuff. I said, hey, you don't have to. It's working in your life all the time, whether you believe it or not. So whatever, it's like saying it's raining. Yes, Pluto will move into Aquarius, fact. And when it does, the emphasis, this greed, this me and my stuff thing that's been so prevalent. I've got to have more stuff. Gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it. Ooh, cheap clothes, great, yes. Let them wind up as landfill or on the edge of a Ghanaian lake when the West is trying to get rid of its rubbish.
Yeah.
We have to, the balance has got to be restored. We are in this together. We look, all you have to do is look at what's happening to Mother Earth, the flooding. Does it, not a single day goes by now when we don't hear about fire, flood, glaciers breaking off and threatening the Nunavut community. Just crazy stuff that suggests Earth is screaming in pain. And we have to change the way we live. Let it start with what's in our hearts. So when I see all this virulent hate that's being spewed everywhere, you know, these authoritarian leaders, populist attitudes, somehow people will give away their agency.
Yeah.
If they feel someone is stronger and will somehow look after them, you know, and I think, wow, that's so naive. You know, so if you really,
and so disempowering as well, that you're not taking your own power in that.
You give it away.
Yeah,
giving it away. Again, this is also keeps me chanting, because when one does this Buddhist practice, chants Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, you begin to realize that you create that agency.
Yeah,
you don't have to wait to be given it or awarded. You know, this is an internal process, and that is what the challenge is now. It really is about. It isn't about how much money you're spending. It isn't about taking photographs of yourself perched on the edge of the Eiffel Tower. Asshole, you're going to fall. Influencers. Who are these people? You know, who are these people? Especially the ones who are 20. Excuse me, what the fuck do you know about life? Really? I mean, seriously. So, you know, the crazy imbalances that have festered and been allowed to proliferate with social media. This is so, again, the word disempowering, exactly what's happening. You know, just slowly, we're leaking out our personal power to other people's opinions.
Well, you can see on social media, you know, the Kardashians have got a massive following of millions of people. And, you know, Greta Thunberg, who's trying to help save the planet, has
they just troll her. Many, they troll her. Those same people troll her because she's not beautiful.
Yeah.
Because she's not beautiful.
She's not wearing the same clothes or the, you know.
She said she won't fly.
Yeah.
Of course, and the frequent flyers are the people who got the worst carbon footprint. Oh, well, that's after corporations, of course. There is a level of responsibility that has to be taken by those of us who know we have to.
Yeah.
We will help the rest. I disparage no one. I don't believe that just because someone doesn't have, if you don't have regular nutrition and education, you don't have much brain power. Fact. It's a fact. I have to take responsibility for those people too. Somehow, see if their kids can't have better nutrition. Can we not introduce education in places where it was, but got taken away because the powers that be knew? Yeah. Oh, if we let them get educated, they may not like us very much.
Exactly.
You know, we're in a kind of a perilous time, but it's full of opportunity. And from the spring, when Pluto first enters Aquarius, we begin to move away from me and my stuff, me and my stuff, to humanity, for the good of us all, which is a much happier place for a start. And there's a lot of it. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
That's great. So it kind of is coming full circle in a way. Then there should be more hope ahead.
Yes, and please do not give up. Never give up. Whatever it is that centers and grounds you, hold on tight. If you can share that with somebody else, do it. Do not be discouraged by the dickheads. Don't let the bastards get you down. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Be happy. You have a right as a human being.
Definitely. Thank you so much for coming today and chatting and sharing life experience and all of the wonderful things that you have gone through. But also about your meditation and how I know running a daily meditation group, I don't do it for an hour. I must admit, I do it for 20 minutes or so.
Whatever works.
But I wish I did do it for an hour, to be honest, because the longer you do it, the better you feel, I feel. Yeah, it's all time, isn't it? And we get I certainly get distracted by the technology.
Yes.
So,
but it also enables us to do this, Amanda.
Exactly. There's always a yin and a yang, and the light and the dark have to be in unison, don't they? So yeah, I think it's always about reaching out and searching for the light, and I've always been a strong advocate of that, in so much so that I often take photos of the sun behind the trees or the sun in the distance, so that people can see that there's light ahead. There's always light ahead, and we should always feel that joy and that happiness, because there is that chance. We have to reach for it within for it to be then shared outside. So I love your energy. I just love the way that when we met, I just felt immensely attracted to that energy, and I thought vibrancy and life force that you have. So I hope that you continue with that life force for as long as possible to share and spread as much love and joy as you can too. So thank you for coming along today. And if you ever want to chat again, please do.
Okay.
I'm also doing a series of meditations at the moment. So I'm recording meditations in the energy of another on Zoom. So I just go and get a person to sit in the background, and the screen just is me in the foreground. But I just create the meditation just intuitively with what comes up. So it's either something that the person directs themselves, or I can suggest what might be good, that would be beneficial for that person, but also beneficial for the world, beneficial for anybody to have access to. So if you ever wanted to do that, I'd love to do that with you. Just it's only a 15-20 minute session. But
when do you do those, Amanda?
I whenever, really. We just find a time and a date that suits both of us. But those meditations I then go on to sell to other people. So I only charge £7.77, so it's not a huge amount of money. But I love being in the energy of other people, and that creation process is so much easier when you're with somebody who is open to that, and to that the way that And when somebody meditates, it's you get into that connection, and it's beautiful, and there's nothing more I mean, it's, yeah, how do you describe that level of peace and joy that you can get to within minutes? And it seems so absurd that we can spend life in suffering, really, when we can access this joy with a few breaths. And so many people dismiss it and say that's woo woo or nonsense or whatever it is that they think it is, you know. There are top leaders of maybe not so much countries, but of businesses that use meditation on a daily basis in order to run their businesses. So, you know, it's all about looking within, isn't it? To be able to create and to co-create as well. So that's why I'm doing this meditation. So I'd love to do that with you at some stage. So I will leave us now, say goodbye to the audience that are here. If there is, I haven't been able to see because I haven't been watching the Facebook page, and I apologize. But thank you very much, Jenni, for coming today.
Pleasure. See you soon.